Hey guys, welcome back to the next video. Let's do the hands-on right now for this video. So for hands-on, I'll just go back to the command line. So what I've done here is that I've created all namespaces. So if you've not done that, that's not a problem. If you go to OPT software and then namespace, we have created these files, right? So I execute the namespace dev test-prod, so that when you do this pod-a, you should see the 3 namespaces and those pods running on that. Once you have done that, once you have completed that, and that's covered as part of the namespace session, we will go ahead and create certificates for it. So, but before that, we will create a folder for this. We'll name it as context, and that's the name of the folder. So we'll get inside the context folder. And then one thing you need to understand. One second. I just want to quickly show you the SSL related introduction. It's not what we cover normally. Okay, so but I hope that you understand the basic structure of SSL. I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to it so that you understand what we're doing. So there are different formats or various formats of SSL available in the system. Okay, so now what we're using for our Kubernetes is something called OpenSSL. So this is basically one of the very prominent SSL provider available, and this OpenSSL is a tool which will create a key file. Okay, so it will create a key file, and then we will create a CSR file, and then we will be actually signing this with a CA signed certificate. There are 2 types of certificates available. One is a self-signed certificate, wherein which we create a private key and then we sign it ourselves without any CA certifying authority. And there is another type of certificate, which is like we create a private key, we create a certificate signing request, and then we send it to third party, or we will use a customized CA, which is a I'm sorry, I got distracted. So we will be using a certifying authority, and we will be actually signing that, and we will create a CRT file out of it. Very simple. Okay, so when do we use third party signed certificate? Right now, when you're working with your Kubernetes, when you're creating a user, or if you're creating a cluster itself. Okay, so any component you create on Kubernetes should be used with a CA signed certificate. Now, who is my CA signed certificate? Very good question. Because CA signed certificates is something which you can create yourself, okay? But the problem is like here, what you're trying to access is Kubernetes system using this user. So when I'm creating a user over here on my Kubernetes, so what it is trying to access, it is trying to access the Kubernetes system. Then if I'm going to use a different certifying authority, then Kubernetes will not understand about that certificate, because certificate works at the trust level. So if you want the Kubernetes to trust your certificate, it needs to be created with the CA certificate of Kubernetes, right? So that's the one thing you should understand before we go forward. So you create a private key, you create a key, a CSR. So till now, the CA certificate is not needed. You can use a standalone command using OpenSSL to do both of this item. And then when you want a certificate, which is very important, because without certificate, you cannot actually, integrate your application. So if you want a certificate, then you need to go for CA signed certificate. Okay. Now, where we will take the CA signed certificate from your Kubernetes PKI folder. I will show you that. But this is the requirement. Without taking the CA signed certificate, or you go for self-signed certificate, or you create your own CA signed certificate and then sign it with the CRT, you will get exception when you are creating the when you're switching it to this user, saying that this user cannot be authorized. to use Kubernetes system, because obviously there'll be SSL connection issues. It will not trust that particular certificate. So only way you can make this user trust is when you use a CA certificate, which is generated by Kubernetes, when you install Kubernetes on your system. Okay. So now where that certificate will be, right? The Kubernetes certificate. So as I told you, it's an ETC Kubernetes PKI. Now, this is the first certificate. It gets created when you install PKI. Okay. I'm sorry, when you configure, when you initialize your Kubernetes, when it initializes the Kubernetes on your master server as a manager server, it's going to create the CA key and CA certificate. Now, these are the two important files you need. Now, if I have a certificate of CA, no, it won't work. You need to have the CA key also. Now, this is very important file, and it should not be shared to anyone within your company or whoever on the mail or anything like that, because the CA.key file will give the authorization for you to sign or create a new certificate and sign that particular key file with the certificate as the authorization. So for authorizing this, you need both the CA certificate and the key file together. If you have just the certificate, you cannot actually authorize it. Will throw up an error. So you need to have the .key file as well. So copy both /etc Kubernetes PKI CA *2 here. I've taken a CA backup also. So I'll just do this key and CRT. So both files are copied on the context folder. So once you have copied these two files, now it's going to be easy for us to do this other commands. Now let's create a key file. So as I told you the process, first create a key file and then CSR and then sign it with the CA certificate. I'll show you the command, don't worry about it. OpenSSL gen RSA-out, and then here you give the key name. Okay, so I'm using dev user.key, so that's very clear on the file name, saying that this is used for dev user. Okay, now if you're creating it for the cluster, you can mention as dev cluster.key, but we are not creating cluster, so just remember that if you're doing that. Okay, so now here we give the size of the key, so you can give 2048 or you can give the next version 4 MB. This is 2 MB we are giving as a key file size. You can also give 4 GB as well, but it will be a little slow because it needs to, every time it encrypts the data or decrypts the data, it's going to take a little while because it's higher size of your key. So now let's give enter. Now this is going to create the key file. Now let's create this for prod as well as test, because we have to create 3 users, right? So let's create these 3 files. Now this key file is very important file, and you cannot share the key file to anyone. Again, same thing goes just like how we created the CA.key, because it has the private key. Now private key is exposed, and you can uncrypt and encrypt the data by yourself, because you will use the private key to decrypt the data. Okay. So now next thing is that we are going to create CSR. That's a second step, right? So now we will use OpenSSL req-new-key. So here we give the key name -subject. So now when you give this without any kind of information, it will ask you a lot of details. Now what I'm going to do is, like, I'm going to finish all those details with one detail over here, and then a name of CN, common name. So I'm going to give dev-user. That's it. And then -out is dev-user dot CSR, certificate signing request. So what this says is like, it is saying required new key, using this key in the subject of a common name dev user. So you have CN, OU, likewise you have so many details. If you don't give this object, right, if you don't give this option and you just give enter, and it'll ask you for so many questions. So rather than that, I just shut it up by giving this particular parameter saying that I just want to enter my CN and I don't want to enter other details. It's not needed actually. Hyphen out, it says the CSR file. Now what it has done is like, if you see that, the CSR file got created. Now CSR file is a readable file, so you can actually see the certificate. Key file, if you can see that, this is your key file. Very important information. You should not be actually sharing this information to anyone. This is private key. That's what it says. Okay. Let's go ahead and create it for the other environments as well. Other users as well. Prod user and prod over here. Prod over here as well. And then test over here. Test over here as well. Done. So now you should have 3 keys for your dev prod test user and CSR for dev prod test user. Very good. Now, the final thing which you're going to do is like, we need to certify that with the CSI certificate. Now, do remember that you need both these files present over here on the same location, because I will not be changing my path. So you can give OpenSSL x509 -req -in. So you need to put in the CSR file name as in like input, and then -ca as in like a certifying authority, and then you need to give ca.key. So this is very much mandatory. -ca. This is the option. CA create serial, and then -out dev-user dot CRT. This is a certificate file. CRT is called certificate. Sometimes we create it in the name of CER also. So depends on what you're getting or which tool you're creating. So there are multiple file types like that, CER, CRT, like that. And then here we are giving it for 10,000 days. All right. So now this the certificate will be valid for 10,000 days. So that's why we are giving it like that. And then give enter, and you can see that there seems to be an exception over here. Certificate request self-signed certificate is okay. Subject name dev user. Okay. So could not read from ca.key. So it says that's not able to read some data from ca.key. So let's get ca.key once, see if it's readable. It's quite readable. I'm not sure. Let me just try again by copy pasting the command. So maybe I made some typo. Yeah, I've made some typo. I just copy pasted from my GitHub. So I have, created the other commands also. Let me copy paste it. Now I have executed the test user. I'm supposed to do for prod user, right? Yeah, prod user is this one. I got confused. All right, so now I should see 3 files over here, newly created: prod user CRT, test user CRT, and dev user CRT. So when we are actually creating the context, we will be actually giving these 3 files only. We will not be giving any of those files. So that means that, can we remove them? No, we cannot remove them. We can remove CSR file, star.csr, because we can generate CSR if we need it again. So you don't really need a CSR file because it is a certificate signing request. Once a signature has been completed, you can have them removed. But what files needs to be there? Key file needs to be remaining and it should never be removed. And CRT file needs to be remaining and it should never be removed as well. And when we are giving context, when we are going to create context, we will be giving that. When we are creating the user, I'm sorry. So now let's create this user on Kubernetes because we have the certificates ready for us. So let's use Kubernetes kube control config set -credentials. I copy paste it. So here I'm using set -credentials and then the name of the user, which is the dev user. And here is I'm giving two items over here. I'm giving the client certificate, which is a CRT file, and the client key file, which is like dev user.key file, right? So you can see that dev user set. So which means that the Kubernetes knows that there is a user over here. Now, which file does it modify? It modifies etc kubernetes admin.conf. So if you go down the bottom of the file, you will see the dev user added over here. So in terms of user definitions over here, in this tag, under this tag, you have one user added here called the dev user, as you can see over here. I'm sorry. So dev user is added. Now, what is the difference between this Kubernetes admin user and this one? Kubernetes admin user is a default user which is present on your system, and it has not been like you should not be removing this user because that's the user which is accessing the default namespace and all namespace. Because this user has access to all namespace across. Okay, so this is a user. Now, why this output is different? Very simple. So what it is saying here is that client certificate data, it says. Here it says client certificate. What's the difference? So if you open this file, you will see this data. Okay, but what they have done is like in terms of data, they have copy pasted the key value inside this argument. And here we have given the file name so that when someone, when this is looking out for this client certificate, it will open this file and it will read it. So if you don't have intention of keeping this file, then you can actually copy the content of this file and put it like this and make it like client certificate -data. So it will directly read the key file from this location. So that is the only difference and nothing else is a difference over here. And yeah, so this is the default context. So when we add the context, it will come in over here in this location. And this is the default cluster. And when we add the cluster, it will come over here. But we are not planning to add any cluster. We will be working with the existing cluster, which is the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, that's the default cluster, which is present over here. So now that we have understood where this actual data gets updated, now let's go and create the rest of the users. So I'm going to create both test user as well as prod user. So both test user and prod user is set right now because I just copy pasted it from my GitHub page. Now let's go ahead and do the context creation, the main hero of this topic. Kube control config set context. And then we give dev-context. So this is where we are creating the dev context --cluster equal to Kubernetes. That's the cluster we are choosing. And then namespace equal to dev. So this namespace should exist before you execute this command. -user is equal to dev-user. So these are the items. So dev user already has our certificate and key value already in place and it is set and it is part of our configuration. Now what I'm going to do is like, I'm going to also create this context and the context is going to look at the Kubernetes cluster, which is the default cluster, and the namespace, which is the default namespace. So if you want to understand the, you can understand this with the Kubernetes config. So the context is under the config option. So you cannot actually use kube control get context or anything like that. Those commands won't work. You have to use kube control config and then get -context. Yes, you should add S in the end. So you can see that this is the default context and this is the cluster which we are mapping over here. So we will create a new context, but then it will use the same cluster, but the auth info will be dev user. So what you're using, and as of now, no namespace assigned, which means all namespaces, okay, by default. But here we are specifying a limit of namespace, which is dev. So only dev namespace will be accessed. So now it is created now. Now where this is created, let's look at the less command again. Let's go to admin.conf again, and then let's come down, and you see the dev user, and you will see other users also. Prod user and test user is also added, right? Likewise, you will also see context added over here. Under context tag, you can see that new context has been created in the name of dev context, and what cluster it's using. It's using Kubernetes cluster. I think I made a spelling mistake here. Did I? No, I think this looks fine, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be fine. So here in the namespace, I've given dev, and user is dev-user. And then I have given the name of this context is dev context. Okay. So this is where it gets updated. So now let's execute the command for the rest of the two contexts which we are supposed to create. And you can see both this context has been created now. Perfect. So now we have done the creation of the context and we know which file gets updated. As this the video is going for a long time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this output for you guys. Okay. So you can see that get context is basically you have these many contexts right now, and each are assigned to different namespaces. And what this star means, it is the current context which you are assigned to. So that's pretty much tells you the story. Now in the next video, I'll be working with you on the operation side of things to see to switch to the context and see what is the error. And that is of course going to be some errors. So we're going to fix that as well. Thank you again for your time and patience. I'll see you on the next video.